Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Mary Beth Kingston. I was AONL president in 2019 and recently retired from my full-time position at Advocate Health. I have the pleasure of hosting today a thought leadership session with Robyn Begley, who I think everybody heard this morning. But just to reiterate, Robyn is the CNO Emerita of AONL and AHA. She led through COVID during much of that time. So it was 2019 to 2025, I think. And I've known Robyn for a number of years. I knew her by reputation, kind of live in the same area of the country. But I met her as a fellow board member. And she was one of those people that when she would say something, I'd be like, okay, I was just going to say that. So you knew you found a kindred spirit. Then she moved into this role. And she also was the chief nurse, as you heard this morning, at AtlantiCare for many, many years. And I will tell you, if you ever walk through AtlantiCare, and Helene knows this, you will see much of Robyn's legacy there. So today is really just a conversation. I have some questions I'm going to ask Robyn, and I would encourage you to think of some because we'll open it up for Q&A in a while. So Robyn, let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Great.
You're welcome.
Thank you all. Appreciate you being here.
So as you know, Robyn achieved the Lifetime Achievement Award, which is a really big deal. Congratulations. But one question I wanted to ask is, looking back over your whole career, what moments or decisions do you feel most shaped the leader that you've become?
Were any of you just at the Schwartz Center or the Schwartz Rounds lecture? Okay. I had a couple things that I was going to talk about, but this is freshest in my mind because I was able to introduce that session. I was bullied as a manager. Actually, I was a director at the time. And it was, I had a job that I loved. My third child was born, and I had my 6-week maternity leave, back in the day. That's all you got. Went back to work. And, it's so personal, but I can just feel it like this is like it was yesterday. And my children I have grandchildren that are older.
They're older.
I have, that I don't even talk about their ages anymore. That's how long ago it was. But I had 3 children, 2 of which went to a preschool that I dropped off in the morning. The school did not open until 7:30. And sometimes it was 7:33 or 7:34, and I'd be in the car with the 2 of them. And then the baby went to a babysitter's, not far. And then I had to get myself to work by 8 a.m. So, and my husband, unfortunately, he would leave the house at 5:30, so he wasn't able to help me. So when I tell you, going back to work, the stress of being there as a leader, as a director, by 8 o'clock sharp, I had the night supervisor who shall remain nameless, who would stand at the door tapping her watch when it was 8:01 or 8:02. It was so distressing to me. And I had managers that came down and got report. It wasn't like I didn't know that I had to be on time and I had to have things covered, but it was just so incredibly stressful that I just said, and my husband said, "What are you doing? You need to give this up." And this was a job that I loved. I had opened a new OB and pediatrics unit at our mainland campus in Pomona, New Jersey. It was really my dream job, and I was, a young director, and I just couldn't do it. And when I think about that now, it completely changed the way that I addressed my team. And, I always greeted pregnancy with joy and, the feeling that this is a good thing, not it's a pain, we have to accommodate. And so it just really, I think, changed my perspective towards people because I just felt, and I didn't do anything about it. I didn't go to my supervisor, really. I just basically said, I'm not doing this job anymore, and I resigned from that position. But it was just the way not to treat people. And anyway, that was early in my leadership career, and I just said, this is going to impact. I didn't know that it would impact me for the rest of my career, but it really does and did. And I hope that I have treated people with kindness and a little bit of, you got to give a little bit. Not to say that I wasn't there and other leaders weren't there till 5 or 6 o'clock at night. It was just that 8:01, I would start getting and it was that one person. The other night supervisors never did that to me, but it was her, and I will never forget her, and in a negative way. So that was just one example.
Well, I think we can all relate to that. I can remember I would be the only executive running in, out of breath, and I'd ask my children to walk around the block because they couldn't go into the school, but I was 5 minutes too early, so I'd say walk slowly around the block and then go to school. And I think remembering how people have to balance so many of those things is so important. How has that shaped kind of what you've done with the workforce, though, in terms of bullying?
Well, and I don't necessarily want to be a commercial for Schwartz Rounds, but in my organization, back in the early 2000s, we did, and I did stay at that organization, by the way. I worked there 35 years in a variety of positions. And actually, after I left that manager job, I became the evening supervisor. And guess what? I kind of got back at that night person a little tiny bit when she wasn't on time. But, we became very active, my organization, in having Schwartz Rounds, and just having, care and compassion and kindness is, one of those things that I would hope that everybody who ever worked for me said that I demonstrated. So I think it really does have a big impact.
All right, so you have led through some extraordinary change in healthcare. What's one leadership lesson that only experience could teach you? Couldn't learn it in school, but you had to go through it.
Well, the obvious one, but the one I think I really have to share is, literally, one day to the next, the week that COVID really hit, that's second to third week in March of 2020. I was in my role as CEO. There wasn't a chief medical officer at the time for the American Hospital Association, so I was really the only clinical person on the executive team. And we had to make so many decisions really quickly. Related to AONL, Griselle, one of my old buddies. Nice to see you. One of the decisions we had to make about canceling the conference, which literally from Monday to Thursday. Monday it was like, well, we might have to think about it till Wednesday. By Wednesday it was very obvious, and Thursday we made the definitive call. And unraveling a conference like this is a really big deal. And it was, the whole team, this is a really challenging but wonderful week for our team because the AONL team gears up. There's kind of a tempo to the year, and this is always the culmination. And to have to just not do this, and I don't know if any of you remember, but we refunded money and we had to undo everything that had been planned was really challenging. But more importantly than that, we had to then figure out what are we going to do. We thought it was going to be short term, but we had no idea in the beginning. We had to really look at our plan for the year and say, how does this change things for our members? And how do we support them? And so our whole business plan, annual plan, whatever you want to call it, just, had to change on a dime. And you can read about change, but boy, to go through that time, especially when we think about back to the policies were changing every couple days, or we would get new direction from CDC, the PPE, all of those challenges, our leaders then had to, all of us, all of you guys, had to interpret that for your teams, take it back, not only your teams on taking care of the patients, but also the leadership teams. So I think we saw that nursing really got a lot of spotlight. And people saw that nurses are just not those, the people on the front line taking care of, but we saw nurses really step up in leadership roles. So we supported that work. And on the AHA side, with my CNO role and no CMO at the time, I had to really weigh in on a daily basis with what AHA was advising our hospital members as well. So it was really challenging, and I don't know that anything really prepared us for that. And you have to use your good judgment, your emotional intelligence, and rely on the experts to really help guide you. And that was that was a tough time, I know, for all of us.
I think nurses are many times throughout our career have faced crises, so you're accustomed to making those decisions in crisis situations. It's just that it lasted so long was the big issue. And Robyn's being somewhat modest because she truly, for the American Hospital, through the American Hospital Association, had to lead policy and lots of decisions for the entire healthcare field and membership of AHA. No chief medical officer, and thankfully you were there. And I think in the past, the CEO of AONL was very engaged in AHA, but didn't quite have that same visibility. And that just really propelled, I think, nursing forward, both at AHA and throughout the country.
Thank you.
Yeah. Was there, and this is something we hadn't talked about, but was there a decision throughout your career that you made that maybe you would have made a different decision or changed it?
Absolutely. I mean, I can think of a few, but one in particular was an HR issue. And to this day, I think about it. You know, I was a new manager.
Let it go.
Let it go. I was a new manager, and there was a serious medical error that was made, and I got a lot of pressure, and I terminated the nurse. And, you know, that was really, you know, it was before we really did just culture and all that, you know, the work around quality. And this nurse was kind of at the sharp end, and it was, you know, attributed to her. But when I really think about that over the years, I remember her name, I remember her face. I really regret that I made that decision, or that I was kind of pushed into making it. I should have stood up for her more, and I just think about that all the time. I regret that.
That'd probably be some of the same regrets I would make. You know, you have a partnership with HR, but you may not always agree with the decisions. I think of people who were terminated or fired for closing, you know, just falling asleep for 5 minutes on night shift. And now we know that, you know, probably allowing people to take cat naps improves their productivity. And, you know, I think we used to have, things changed, but we used to have those hard and fast rules. And yeah, it's logic, and so that's a great example. So many of the folks in this room are experienced nurse leaders, but many more are aspiring nurse leaders. What's something you wish someone had told you about a little bit earlier in your journey?
That's a good one. I think timing is everything, many times. And sometimes you can have a wonderful idea, you can have the plan, you can have the finances worked out, you know, it just looks really complete to you, but if the time isn't right for a number of reasons, you know, it either is unsuccessful or it just never happens. It doesn't get off the ground. One example of that is, I talked about the new OB unit that we opened, and this was many years ago. It was like actually 1987, I think. And I had worked in Massachusetts prior to coming to New Jersey and working in my health system that I spent 35 years at. But I had been, and this is going to be funny to the young people here, which are most of you, but mother-baby nursing was a real new care model. And I had experienced that in Massachusetts, and it was, you know, and they were very progressive up there. I worked outside of Boston, and I just thought it was wonderful. And so when we built this new unit at our mainland campus, I was going to implement that. And I just, you know, and actually I had support from, you know, the leadership. They thought it was a great idea. I had all the, you know, the staffing, scheduling, you know, financial, everything was done. And moving into a new building with staff that came from old, you know, existing staff from the city campus, new staff that had no OB experience, people from other hospitals that did have OB experience. It was just one of those things that it didn't work. And I was so disappointed because I really felt like that was better care for our mothers and babies. And the docs didn't really support it. That was probably the critical factor, that they did not like this. The pediatricians did not want to go, you know, into the mom's rooms with the baby and examine the baby there, God forbid. So it didn't work. And I was so disappointed. And you know what? A couple years later, and I wasn't the manager at the time, it was adopted, and it continues, I believe, to this day. It's just the way pretty much things are done all over, but it wasn't the right time. Just one of those things.
I'm laughing at the, mother-baby being a new idea. I was a diabetic clinical specialist in the early 1980s, And home glucose monitoring was the big thing. And we would cut the strips in half. And when you look to see how far we've come with diabetic care management and self-management, it's just amazing. Yeah. All right. So a lot of thought goes into what's the future? What do we need for the future? So when you think about the future of nursing leadership, what gives you the most hope right now?
Okay, in my last 7 years, I mean, I retired last year in 2025, but prior to that, spent the better part of, with the exception of the middle of COVID, I was able to travel the country and visit with nurses, nurse leaders, healthcare leaders, not all nurses, all over the country. I can't tell you how that, I mean, travel was hard, but boy, did I get re-energized every time I walked into an organization and talked to the nurse leaders, talked to the nurses. I mean, you know, we see in the press and in social media all the negatives, but that's not what I experienced when I was able to travel the country. I mean, Ina talked this morning and last night at her dinner, and I was able to visit Yale New Haven. And I was able to see how, you know, when she made rounds, people ran to her. And I, you know, was able to meet so many of her team. And that played out all over the country at different hospitals. So and our new young nurses and our nurse leaders are really smart. They're technologically savvy. They see that, you know, technology really shouldn't be shied away from, but we can use it to help, you know, better improve our patient care and, you know, for the betterment of our patients and their families and the community. So I'm really excited. I mean, you all, I think if you were at the morning session, heard me brag a little bit about my daughter. I mean, I'm just, you know, her and her, you know, her peers, her colleagues, that age group, they're just remarkable. And so I have great hope for the future. I really think that it's, you know, we're going through tough times in healthcare right now. I know the finances are really challenging as we look at hospitals across the country, but I also feel like things are going to have to radically change for us to be able to take care of everybody. And so we probably have some rocky, you know, times ahead and rough waters, but I think we're gonna emerge victorious and be able to do the things that we know we'll be able to do with everybody's brains, but also with technology assisting.
It's funny, we were just mentioning the Magnet Conference with a few of my kind of Philly area friends, and I remember at different Magnet conferences feeling that way, seeing nurses at the bedside presenting their ideas, and then seeing the nurses that had come from our organization come back like on fire with all these ideas, just filled with optimism. Yeah. And they were kind too, because I had to sit down for one of the sessions, and I turned around to a nurse next to me, a very young nurse, and I said, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get up. She said, I'll help you. So not only smart and optimistic, but kind to boot. Kind and caring. So I wanted to ask more a little bit about maybe your personal life, if that's okay. So you mentioned that you retired from your full-time position. Mm-hmm. And so I probably know a little bit about this, but if you could share with folks, how are you spending your time?
Okay. Well, I'm loving it. But it took a little while, to be very honest. I knew that it was time. People had always said to me, because I would say to them, how do you know it's time, it's time to retire from your job? And they said, you just know. And that happened to me probably mid-2024. It was a lot of traveling. And so I wanted it to be a smooth transition. So I informed Rick Pollack, the AHA CEO, that, the end of the year would be it for me. So he had 6 or 7 or 8 months to, be able to do the recruitment process. So it was hard at first. I'd say the first 6 to 8 months, I felt like, I don't know, just unsettled a little bit. I mean, it was great having free time, but I really hadn't settled into retirement. Probably last summer, I just really felt like this is good. What do I really want to spend my time on? More time with my family for sure was a priority. So I got to, what I didn't say this morning, which I meant to add as a little ha-ha, but when I was talking about my family, my kids to this day tease me about the number of boxes of Hamburger Helper that they have consumed over their lifetime. And just things like that. And I said, well, you turned out pretty well. So you know what? I'm not gonna beat myself up about that. but I wanted to spend more time with my children and my 8 grandchildren, so I've been able to do that and, really think about what I want to do. Professionally, I'm still active. I serve on a couple boards. I introduced the Schwartz Center rounds, and I'm the vice chair of the Schwartz Center for Healthcare, for Compassion in Healthcare, and I'm really proud of that. They do wonderful work. I also am on my system healthcare, my system board from New Jersey, and participate in a couple other schools. I've done some guest lecturing, things like that, which I really enjoy, but it's enough. And I'm really trying hard to say no. When that's been hard for me my entire career. So I'm trying to really evaluate whether it's something that I want to spend the time doing. But, I'm going to share this if it's okay with you, Mary Beth. So you might have kind of guessed that we're very good friends. And ever since we've been on the board together, we just really have clicked, and we don't live very far from each other. So we are embarking on a 168-mile walk, the Camino, in May.
By ourselves.
By ourselves, just the 2 of us.
If you hear like a news flash of two women are lost in Spain or Portugal.
Seniors lost on the road in Portugal, you'll know that, it might be those 2. But it's something that we talked about for quite a number of years, and I don't know if any of you heard about it, but it's, it's not super physically challenging, we don't think, but we'll see. We'll report back on that. But we're looking forward to that. It's a journey where you're actually, we asked our husbands if they wanted to go. Hard no. And my husband said it's supposed to be what's the word, like, yeah, contemplative and spiritual, and he said the 2 of you, we would never get a word in edgewise. So.
So said, don't judge me. Like if I say I have to stop, then don't judge me.
We'll be okay. We're going to take care of each other, but we're looking forward to it. So it's something that I would never have imagined that I would have done in my life. So we'll let you know how it goes.
And another thing that you said really resonated with me when you said it's, you're learning how to say no. Yeah. A physician I worked with once said to me, if you don't say no to anything, then your yes means nothing. Mm-hmm. And I really took that to heart. Mm-hmm. So I still am bad at it too, though.
But another friend of mine said, say, I can't do that, but I can find you someone who can. So that's the other thing that I've been trying to practice.
Push it off, right?
Yes.
So this award represents a whole lifetime of impact. But leadership, as we know, is never a solo journey, and you mentioned that today. Who were the people or partnerships that really influenced you in your career or made a difference in your journey?
Oh, there are so many. I'm going to start with, and I mentioned him in my remarks this morning, George Lynn. And several of us in the room have worked with George, was the CEO of my hospital and healthcare system, and he had a profound impact on my life and career. And basically, we had what was called a TQM, and total quality management back in the day, but it was named after a person, Tony Quigley actually, who passed away at a young age, but was really active in our organization. And we established a fellowship in his honor. And what happened is that you left your job for 6 months. The person who was selected gave up wherever gave up their position, went and worked one-on-one with George, on either one or a variety of projects, and then with the plan that there would be something for you, with the belief and the trust that there would be something for you to go to. So, because they didn't hold your position for 6 months, obviously, and I was actually the evening supervisor at the time, that's right. And I was selected and went and worked with George and had a couple projects. The one that I'm most proud of that really endures to this day is I led the process to establish the values of our organization. And to this day, I can spit them out, and they lived in our organization. It wasn't just something that was on the wall or in a binder. And so just being in his presence and listening to him and meeting with him every week and reporting on what I was doing, he was the most inspirational guy that I have ever known. And really, and I was in the supervisor role, but planning to either go back and do, I mean, I was thinking about midwifery school, or I was thinking about, going up the practice track. And he just really, he said, you got to get yourself back into school. You can have impact on more nurses who have impact on more patients. I mean, he just made me see that leadership was really where I belonged, but where to go and how to get there. I never aspired to be a nursing leader.
That is just a great way.
Awesome.
I don't know how many CEOs do that today, but boy, what an opportunity.
And he's still my friend. I talked to him. He actually wrote a letter of recommendation for me for the AONL job, and actually said, I'll do that. I'll write you the letter, Robyn, but I'm going to call Rick Pollack myself right now and tell him that you're the person for the job. So I credit his influence for sure with Rick, and that was, in 2018. And just such an unbelievable leader. We would walk through brick walls for him. I mean, we just would do anything for this man, and he never embarrassed anybody in public. He was the kindest man, and if he was disappointed in you, you were so upset with yourself that he didn't have to say anything, kind of thing. But just, a real inspiration, and he launched so many healthcare leaders' careers from our organization. He was just, and he's still kicking, and he still serves on a couple boards, and I talk to him every couple months, and, just a really great man. But there's other people, the other group of leaders that I would say really had impact on me were my New Jersey people. When I became interim CNO, and that was 1999, and it was our CNO suddenly left. It was, there was no succession plan, and all of a sudden it was, Robyn, would you do this for a year? Or would you do this while we search for, for the permanent person? And I said yes, and a year went by and there was no person. And I got myself involved in our statewide ONLNJ, as well as we had like a nurse executive, well, I forget what we called it at the New Jersey Hospital Association, but also a group of pretty much the same people who met monthly. And they were my lifeline. And, to this day, the collegiality of nursing leaders in New Jersey is so strong, and we compete. I mean, the hospitals, like everywhere else, compete on on the billboards, on the leapfrog scores. I mean, you name it. But we could pick up the phone and call each other and help each other out, share policies, do the things that you would expect of a close colleague. So I'd say they had a really huge amount of impact. And then AONL. The board members, the presidents that I was able to serve with, I mean, just really all influenced me. And so I'm just very thankful for the great group of people that I've had the experience to work with over my career.
I can think of another example. When Pam Thompson, who was a wonderful CEO of AONL, when she had announced her retirement, I was part of the search group. But even before that, we were interviewing, and a group of us sat down. We said, well, I think Robyn would be good for this. So, and you were at a time where you were thinking, maybe I'll only be working at AtlantiCare for a year or two more. Yeah. And so we corralled her and got her down and sat down and said, you need to do this. And you're like, oh, there's no way, I'm not going to work for another 5-6 years. But then she thought about it. And I think that peer experience is so important. I experienced it. I was a Robert Wood Johnson fellow, and I was part of a merger. And I was thinking, yeah, maybe it's time to, move on. And they were like, what are you talking about? You got to go for that job. You need to do this. And sometimes it's, we kind of say, oh, it's time, and somebody else sees that, sees something in you, or says this, you would really be good at this. You would really make a difference. And I think we influenced you too. That can count as the board. But I do remember that lunch, and Robyn saying no, and then coming back the next day and saying, I thought about that, and I think maybe I'd like to do that.
Yeah.
So, last question, and then we'll take some questions.
Sure.
But if you could leave this whole audience with one lasting thought, one message, or even a few messages about leadership, purpose, impact, what would you want them to carry forward from this discussion?
Okay, so I wrote a few things down. I thought about that ahead of time. My biggest challenge in life is procrastination. And my entire life, even into my retirement, I can tell you that as I was scribbling the answers to some potential questions on the plane coming here,
That is procrastination.
But the reason, and I have dissected this issue for years and years, is because I feel like it has to be perfect. So if I wait till the last minute, it is what it is, if you know what I mean. So, and only those of you that have experienced, procrastination maybe understand that. But what I want to share is that, procrastination stresses you out, and then your product is probably still really good, but you went through all that time stressing. So good is good. Great is great. Perfection is probably unachievable. So get to it and get it done. And I can preach here, but it's still my number one challenge. But what's that expression? Like, perfection is the enemy of great, or enemy of good. You just got to, start, do what you need to do. That's my biggest challenge still to this day. But I wrote a few more things down. Let me go. I said timing is everything, and that's really important. One of those things that George taught me, we've all done 360s, I'm sure, or had your team evaluate you, your bosses, we've all gone home with that manila envelope of the results that no one's looked at except HR, and they've compiled, the numbers as well as the comments that are, of course, supposed to be anonymous. And the first thing you do is I would procrastinate and not open the envelope until the last minute. And then when you when you look at what people say about you, you don't look at the 18 things that are amazing and wonderful. You're looking at the 2 or 3 comments and trying to figure out who wrote that. And maybe look at your 3 areas for improvement when everything else you knocked out of the park. And you focus on those negative, or the things that really need work. Or don't even need a lot of work, need a little work. George taught me, don't pay attention to that at all. Play to your strengths. And he also taught me, hire people, surround yourself with people who complement what you feel are your weaknesses. So and not that doesn't mean that you never even look to improve on anything, but it really means leverage your strengths. And I remember graduate school. Those business accounting courses were killers for me. And I'd tell the professor, I have people to do that for me. He'd be like, these nurses, because a couple of the people in our classes were nurses, others were all business majors. But, and not that you don't need to have competencies in everything, but you don't have to have A+ in every single aspect that you are evaluated on. And, I surrounded myself, I was really good at picking a great team, I have to say that, who accomplished so many wonderful things in our organization. Well, AONL, Atlanticare, those were the places where I spent most of my career, but oh boy, and it was wonderful to do it together. Trust your team. The other thing, I was pretty hands-on, and it was all about my need to have control or to kind of see and then you got to get to the point where you're, especially as you aspire to, to maybe larger scopes, you need to trust the people who work with you. And so, and give up some of that, controlling, I got to be on every decision and you just have to give it up. So trust is important. Fail fast. If you do make a mistake or something doesn't, hit the mark, either retool, try something else, but you can't just let things linger. And I think the most important thing is be open and honest with people, have those crucial conversations, but don't forget to be kind and to have compassion with the people that you're talking with. You can deliver tough messages in a way that isn't brutal, isn't harmful and hurtful to the people that you're talking to. And it takes practice and skill to have some of those crucial conversations, but it's beneficial for the work and the team, but also for the person. So that's something I would share. And I just, I started with have a plan, but don't miss the opportunities that come. And I really think, especially with the changes, that we've been experiencing in healthcare and what we're seeing, just the speed of play, there's going to be, and there are lots of opportunities. So if you look at it from a traditional perspective, it's like, we'll never accept a position, that's a lateral move, you always need to be looking up. And while some of that has validity, there's lots of things that are happening. And, it's not always about the title. So, you got to look and see what you think is really a great fit for you and where you could really contribute.
And, I think sometimes in nursing we can be a little bit rigid about
Yes.
some of that.
Yes.
So, where we say, okay, you can't be a director unless you've been a manager
Right.
and all those kind of things. And many times it's more the characteristics of the leader that really matter. And what else really resonated with me was when you were talking about play to your strengths, because there's just some things I'm never going to be good. I took statistics pass-fail in grad school, and I hired someone to help me with my dissertation because there's just no way I was ever going to get, and I'm not going to, I went into, nursing administration, I'm not going to be a researcher.
Right.
So, yeah, you gotta know when you need help.
Yes, good point.
A little
Excellent.
bolstering.
So we've got about 13 minutes left. I would love to, ask you to, to share some of your thoughts. Did what I say resonate with you? Did I miss anything big? And what questions you have? I think Mary Beth is going to
I'll come around with the microphone. You get number one.
Thank you so much. Robyn Linda Valentino from New York. I just want to first appreciate you and what you've done for nursing. And for me personally, how I experienced that was your energy, your authenticity, your willingness to help. And this is a woman who had to be in 25 different places inside of 10 minutes. And she always knew that when you talked to her, you were the only person in the room. Aww. And so I really appreciate that about you. So what I think I'd like to ask you is, what are you excited about the future of nursing? What excites you?
What excites me? Well, I think that's a really good question. I think we have to be part, we've been saying this for years, but it's more true now than I think than ever. We can't open a newspaper, that's such an old cliche. We can't look online, really, is where we're getting our news these days, and not see or hear or use AI. I mean, when we're ordering, when my phone's telling me what I just talked about 5 minutes ago, that there's a sale on, whatever, our hiking backpack that we just chatted about, like this is it's just pervasive in our lives. So how are we going to take this? And I don't think anybody, and there's lots of companies working right now to be first to market with, ABC things for healthcare. They can't tell us. Nurses need to be part of the design. And that's challenging. And, how do we get people in the places where they need to be able to? We can't fix this after it's all designed, implemented, and it's not working for us. So I think we need innovation, creativity, all those things that, frankly, in the 1970s, we didn't really learn. But now, as I talk to actually, like deans and had the opportunity, Deb Troutman from AACN is a friend of mine. I still talk to her. Like, those are the things we need to really be making sure that the professors and the instructors and the students know is part of what they need to be involved with, as well as our new nurses who are really, really good at this stuff. Yeah. And thank you for your kind words. They're very nice.
Hi, my name is Taylor. I am a nurse manager in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm in the hamburger helper stage of my career. And I really love my job. I really love my team. But after I started having young children, it got harder, right? To build this career, build your family, build your home life. If you could tell yourself in those early years, you're building and serving a lot of hamburger helper. If you could tell yourself something or a piece of wisdom career-wise or gentle with yourself or something you could go back and tell yourself, what would it be in those early years of your career where things might be happening faster than you wanted to at work or slower than you wanted to, and you feel kind of in that in between?
That is a wonderful question, and I'm going to remember that hamburger helper line stage, because if I ever write a book or write a column or something, I'm going to include that. I think a lot of people can relate. It's hard, but I think I wanted to be, we talked about it a little earlier, I wanted to be perfect at everything. I didn't leave my house if the beds weren't made and everything wasn't straightened. And, I was a nut. I mean, I was crazy about trying to do everything and stress myself out big time. And
Robyn, we have many similarities, but we differ there.
The throw blanket on my couch has to be folded a certain way, that kind of thing, before I leave the house. And my children did not inherit that gene, I will tell you that. I think we have to, the beautiful thing about nursing is when I had to go be, or when I felt that I needed to be a part-time evening supervisor, I could. So that was my break. Actually, I ended up working full-time, even though it was a part-time job. But, one of those things where they just, you can't say no. But nursing does give you flexibility, which I think is a great, characteristic of our career. But I know there's so many people that get, into that fast track. And once you get into nursing leadership, it's like, many of my generation are retiring, so there's lots of vacancies, so people are moving, whereas for a long time, they kind of were more static years ago. So I don't know that I have the perfect answer for you, but we have to have patience with ourselves. And the other thing I would tell young moms, moms with young children, enjoy those years. They go so fast. And before you know it, your children will be graduating from high school and they'll be out of the house. And, I see a couple of people nodding their head, you get it. It just, it's wonderful and, you're going to, and you got it, my husband was a wonderful, supportive husband. The morning time was not his thing because of his work schedule, but, he was making the hamburger helper most of the time. And I would sometimes drag my feet and not rush home from work because whoever got home from work first had to start dinner. So, just one of those, one of those things that it is what it is. But you will figure it out. Just be patient with yourself and everything doesn't have to be perfect.
We just had
any more words of wisdom?
Well, I just had a conversation with someone at lunch, and what we said is, you do the best you can with the supports. Not I had family around, so I had help. Not everybody has that. Right. So, and many people may not have the option of working, various hours. So you do the very best you can with the resources that you have at hand. Yep. And so I think you have to give yourself, as you said, some grace to know that everything, I didn't worry about the beds being made, Robyn. I just, if I got the kids out of the house and, myself and we all looked reasonable, I felt like I had achieved something major that day. So maybe lighten up on some of the other things. Not you personally, but we'll see how this trip goes. I said Robyn and I will either be...
I even make my hotel bed. I hate to say that, but...
even closer friends, or she won't want to talk to me for a year after this trip. We'll have to see how it goes.
Hi, I'm Therese Thrall. I'm with AONL, the managing editor, and I've had the pleasure of working for Robyn, not as a nurse. But I had a question for you, Robyn. I remember when you went to the White House and met with President Trump and Vice President Pence in that group of nurses, and when you testified before Congress, and I was wondering if you could give the listeners here an idea of what were your takeaways from those experiences, and what advice do you have for other nurse leaders who are going to participate in advocacy?
Oh, that's a great one. First of all, members of the COVID-19 task force were in the room when I got a call, I think it was a Sunday night, that I was invited to the White House that coming Wednesday to meet with the vice president at the time. That was the ask, and members of the COVID-19 task force. And that was the very early days of COVID. And the request was, what do nurses, we need to hear what nurses need. So I think there were a group of about 10 of us, and we got together on the phone because at that point, that was right after everybody got sent home, basically. That's when we left our Chicago offices. Everybody really started working remotely. And so we had a conference call. We talked about, we had 2 minutes each to speak. So we all took a facet of what we knew were the needs. And at the time, if you think back, it was PPE, it was, you know, children were being sent home from school. We had, you know, and you know, that was in the beginning of who's taking care of the kids, how are they going to continue to get educated. Nurses were taking care of their elders. I mean, it was, you know, kids, elders, and there was another, I'm trying to think, and workforce. That was, you know, like what were we doing in these areas of the country where there were huge needs and other places were home, but nothing was really going on there. So we all developed our responses. It was very, oh boy, was it stressful. We went to the White House. We had to get, that was when we were screening everybody's temperatures. You know, remember in the early days, we weren't masking, but we were, you know, we were checking temps. We had to all sit, you know, like 3 feet apart. And, you know, it was really interesting. They were the vice president sat next to me, the president sat next to him, and they were interested in hearing from our perspective what we needed, but it was very clear that, how to say this, like they didn't have any idea of like the challenges. And so, you know, and some members of, I'm not saying everybody, but our elected officials did not, for the most part. So we were supposed to be in there about 25, 30 minutes. We were in there like for over an hour. And we shared the challenges, and I believe they were heard. I know the vice president was taking copious notes, and you know, he'd lean over to me and he'd be like, I got that, you know, or, you know, so I knew that there was understanding and people were trying to take our words to heart and very seriously. But, you know, we know there were continued challenges. But it taught me how important it is that we do advocate and we do participate in policy. And then several years later, when we were working, it was the workforce issues, and the House Subcommittee on Workforce and had asked me and I think 2 other people to testify and wanted to know the state of affairs like right post-COVID, and you know, we were having real big challenges. So I went armed with a binder that was about this thick, literally, that I read for a week, and was peppered with, you know, I was prepared to be peppered with very antagonistic questions, because sometimes when you see on TV, you know, people are asked really hard questions, and I did not find that at all. People were very responsive and respectful of the work that we had done, and asked questions about what's the reality, what does this mean, and we talked about, you know, the care that, you know, the people that need to take, not just nurses, it was actually, you know, healthcare, the numbers of people that we needed and the projections and all the statistics that we have, and, you know, it was kind of deer in the headlights. Like, people don't always think, I mean, and our politicians, and our elected officials, not just politicians, everybody, this isn't their focus every day. So we are the experts. When you go to your local assembly person in your district or at your state level, they really do want to hear from you and learn from you. On the state level, on the national level, I mean, you don't always meet with the representative or the senator, but you meet with a very knowledgeable member of their staff or their team who then conveys that information. And in some cases, you do meet with the senators or the congressmen or the assembly people, and they do listen. So, I mean, that was like the big aha for me in my AONL job, is how important it is for them to hear. We spoke to Bernie Sanders, not me personally, but part of our group when we did Advocacy Day a couple years ago. And he did not understand and I don't know if he changed his position on it, but when our leaders went and talked about some of the implications of what he was advocating for, he said, I've never heard from the nursing leaders before. And I never thought about this perspective. And I think they followed up and they wanted to, you know, have further conversations. So even with a person who you don't think has the position, I think it was about ratios at the time, even when you don't know or you think that people are set in stone with their positions and why they are, many times they will listen to, you know, to kind of the other side of the story or some of the you know, the unintended consequences, perhaps, of what their decision or if what they want is enacted into law might have, which is, I think, a really good thing.
Robyn, are we at time up there?
28 seconds.
Okay.
One more.
And will you stay? Are you willing to stay if people have additional
Oh,
questions?
of course. Yeah.
Mine's kind of silly, but so I'm Whitney Van Winkle, and I am the director of nursing for a nonprofit organization in Louisville, Kentucky. First, I want to mirror what, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but what she said. You are certainly an inspiration to this room of nursing leaders, but when's the last time you took a nap?
A nap?
And how many hours do you have in your day? Because I think you got more than me.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm not a long, like 6 hours of sleep is pretty much what I get. And that's what I wake up now. I've just, but thank you. And occasionally, once in a great while, I take a nap, but I'm not a napper either. Just not me. I think we're at time.
We are. So,
So
if
I
you have
really
other
want to thank you
questions-
for
Yes.
coming and thank you for this morning. Just the reaction of everyone was wonderful and it's something I'll never forget.
Thank you, Robyn. And if you have additional questions,
Yeah,
Robyn
come
will
on
stay
up.
for a few minutes.